It's time for the Big Three, and today's topics: big news, moment of the year, and this week's must-read. So let's bring in my Big Three panel. Professor of Political Science at Hiram College, Jason Johnson, defense reporter for Politico, Juana Summers, and MSNBC contributor and former Bush Cheney senior advisor, Robert Traynham. And a big hello to all three of you. So,
hello there,
guys,
Alex.
hey there. Let's talk about the two big developments today on stories that the GOP has used to criticize the White House this year. I'm going to go, Robert, to you first with Obamacare. With the 1.1 million people now having signed up on the federal exchange, is the tide turning here, and you think Republicans no longer have the Obamacare rollout as a talking point to criticize the president?
Well, it appears, Alex, that the tide is turning to a certain degree, but let's always remind ourselves here is that we still have tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of Americans that are getting cancellation notices. And the fact of the matter still remains that the president said, one, that if you like your health care, you could keep it, and B, and also the truth, is that that's not the case. So I think we're still trying to see exactly where the dust is going to settle here, but I do agree that the Republicans have to move on to another talking point, and that most likely probably will be the fiscal cliff, the debt ceiling and the fiscal crisis, probably with the next 3 to 6 months. Yeah,
well, it's coming up, I think, mid-February is when we're supposed to be tackling that one. Juana, we have a New York Times report which says Al-Qaeda is not linked to the 2012 Benghazi attack, which killed 4 Americans. The GOP certainly tried to turn this into a scandal and blame the president. Where are we now on this issue?
I expect to see Republicans continue to hammer the administration over Benghazi. Just today on the Sunday shows, you heard Darrell Issa, who has been one of the Republicans leading that charge, as well as Mark Rogers, one of the leading Intelligence Committee members, say that, they stand by their criticism, that this is still a huge issue for the administration. So I would expect in 2014, we're going to hear a lot more about this, a lot more ramping up, still talking about those talking points that Susan Rice delivered on many television networks. That is not going anywhere.
Jason, so these two issues are on the table here. Give me your sense of both.
The only importance of Benghazi is if you think it's a silver bullet against Hillary Clinton in 2016, and no one's going to care by then. So I've always thought that was a waste of time for the Republican Party. As far as Obamacare, again, this is not going to be an issue as long as people actually get their service by next summer. This is a long-term project. So eventually people will be tired of hearing about the bad website. I mean, heck, Target had bad websites too. Security information happens everywhere. But if people are actually getting their health care by next summer, the Republicans are going to have to talk about something else for the midterm elections.
Okay. All right, you guys, let's go on to the next thing, the moment of the year. I'll start with you, Robert. What's yours?
I would say it's probably two things. One, clearly it was Nelson Mandela's death earlier this month. And secondly, the defining moment for me was when this Pope came out and said, quote, "Who am I to judge?" For the first time, I heard a Pope actually talk like a human being. For the first time, I heard a Pope actually relate himself to another individual. And I thought that was very, very, very profound and also very touching in many ways.
Yeah, of course. All right, Jason, I have your moment of the year. So let's listen to that.
State of Florida versus George Zimmerman. Verdict: we, the jury, find George Zimmerman not guilty.
So you chose George Zimmerman's verdict. Why?
Because this is going to be something that resonates for another 20 years. You think about it, we still talk about O.J. We still talk about Rodney King. These kinds of trials become sort of seminal moments for an entire generation. And this one this year, it wasn't just because George Zimmerman got off. It's the life he's led afterwards and what it said about American society in general. We've had all these fights about stand your ground laws, gun violence in America. I think this case had a larger resonance than most of the cases in the past, and we'll still be talking about it in a year, 2 years, maybe even 20 years from now.
And in part of the reason we may still be talking about it is just the actions of this man. I mean, can you believe all the things that have happened? He's rescued people, and he's had, marital problems, unfortunately for
Violence.
him. Yeah. I mean, that's part of what I think is going to keep this going.
Yeah, the story keeps going. I mean, Rodney King eventually fell off the map, but George Zimmerman continues to be a point of contention. And it's weird because as the story has gone on past the trial, the conservatives have lost interest in them because they've realized that maybe he was a thug and a jerk in that conflict. And many of the liberals have said, look, this is what we were talking about all along. And I think that's one of the reasons that the story will resonate. And in the end, unfortunately, there's still a 17-year-old child who lost his life.
Yeah, absolutely. Trayvon Martin, absolutely. All right, Juana, let's take a look at your moment of the year. Everyone, let's watch.
My name's Ed Snowden. I'm 29 years old. I work for Booz Allen Hamilton as an infrastructure analyst for NSA in Hawaii.
Okay, so you chose Edward Snowden. What's behind that?
I did. There's no question this is the policy story of the year. The disclosures Edward Snowden made about the scope and breadth of surveillance by the NSA have really changed the way we talk about surveillance in this country and changed, for the better or worse, the debate that we're having about whether competing conditions of like privacy and national defense. So, and this could head to the Supreme Court. So next year, I think that the NSA story will certainly still be driving headlines as well.
You know, I have to ask both of you, Robert and Jason, where you think this is going next, the NSA story. I'll let you go first, Jason, then you, Robert.
I don't think this is going to end. And I think what's important is anybody who's ever been a political dissident in this country knows that the U.S. government's been spying on people for years. They used to spy on MLK. They've been spying on people since the 50s, 60s, and 70s. But I think Snowden put a middle-class, understandable face on the story. And I think now it's the suburbs where people saying, oh my gosh, is the government following what I'm doing on Netflix and who I'm texting? So I think this is something that's going to matter both Republicans and Democrats moving forward. And that's a good thing for this country.
Robert?
I agree with Jason, but let me also quote Winston Churchill. This is not the end. This is not even the beginning of the end, but this is the end of the beginning. What Mr. Snowden did here was traitors. He's a traitor. There's no question about it that what he did is put every single one of our lives in jeopardy. He also put millions of lives in jeopardy around the world. What he did was despicable, and I think that if, in fact, he ever gets tried, he most likely will spend the rest of his life in jail.
Okay. Guys, coming up next, we have the must-read Sundays with sex, facial hair, and politics. Go figure. Stick around.
Did you get the chips for the